Welcome to the Streets and People podcast, where we explore having more transport options that are less hassle to use. Hosted by Get Around Caboolture, we bring you 3 types of episodes. People and Projects share stories of change. Not Everyone Drives gives voice to non-drivers. Road Rules 360 unpacks road rules for people outside a car. Music by Grand Project, and let's make our Grand Project reimagining streets made for people. Today we're doing one of our People and Projects episodes. I'm delighted to be in the studio with Paris Lord. Now, Paris, I think I've known you for a couple of years now. We've touched base every now and again here and there. You're a keen supporter of us, which is amazing and delightful. And so it's great to finally be able to have you on the show, because we've been trying to get this arranged for a little while now. I'm here on Gubbi Gubbi country in Queensland in Caboolture. And Paris, whereabouts are you?
Hello, Andy. Well, today I'm on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people in Boorloo, also known as Perth, but usually I live on Ngunnawal Ngambri country, also known as Canberra.
So what made you interested in bikes? And we've spoken before about bike buses and all sorts of different community aspects of bike riding. What made you interested in that whole area?
I was lucky enough to learn how to ride as a child. My Uncle Nick taught me how to ride when I was growing up in Ballina in northern New South Wales on Bundjalung country. So learning to ride before I was 5 was always this happy place for me. I would try to ride as much as I could just because I felt good being outside on the bike. I'd ride to cricket when we'd be playing different towns. I'd ride to uni sometimes. I would ride to wherever I could. I would just get on the bike and escape, and that would be my own private time. I lived in a small house with 2 sisters. Just needing my own space would sometimes be, okay, let's get on the bike and go for a ride and ride to the beach and sit in a tree and that sort of thing. And as I've got older, I've been lucky enough to live in other countries, and sometimes I've been able to have a bike as well. And that's just been the place that helps me feel good and helps me explore the place where I'm living. And as I've gotten older, I've always found comfort in the bike. And in the last couple of years in Canberra, especially coming out of COVID, I thought I may only be in this town a few more years. I wanted to pack it all in and move back to Europe, where I used to live about 25 years ago. And then I thought, well, let's just try to see if there's any interest in people exploring Canberra slowly and learning stories about embassies. And that's how Canberra by Bike started. I started with some embassy tours, but nobody came to the first one. And then I tried it slightly differently because I'd organised the first one on social media platform, and that didn't work. But then I switched to a different platform called Meetup, and people came along to that one, and I told stories about the architecture of the various buildings and people who'd worked there and why Canberra, some of the stories about Canberra and that sort of thing. And people showed, and I tried a different tour and people showed, and people kept coming, and I try all sorts of things. And in part, it started out just as a way to try to make friends, but it's since broadened into many different areas, because for me, it's one of the ultimate tools that can help reconnect neighbourhoods, connect people of any age and ability. And there's something about moving around through space at your own pace, particularly with other people, and just talking. It's just a beautiful way to move around. And me and others are trying to help people rediscover that if they haven't encountered it as an adult, and just reminding people that this fun, free machine is always there for us. So that's how it's all started and how it continues to go.
And so do you have people turning up week after week, or what's the frequency? Is it a weekly, monthly?
It depends. I would love it to be weekly, but my family says no, because it's usually a weekend thing, so I have to factor it around that. But yeah, we get a mixture of regulars on some of the rides and the bike parties and so on, and others who are hearing about it for the first time. Or I've even had people who were visiting Canberra from New York. One was a university lecturer and was there with her partner and found out what we did and came along to a tour. That was a sculpture tour a few weeks ago. Because I'm always trying to show people different parts of Canberra, whether it's architecture, whether it's embassies. We do street art tours, we do sculpture tours, art trails, we do bike parties, just all sorts of things, because Canberra has a reputation of being a boring city, particularly by people who are only there for work. So they basically fly in, they go from the airport to their accommodation up to Parliament House and back. They don't actually see the real Canberra. So part of it's a pushback against that. And just to remind people, look, it's a nice planned city, and there's a good skeleton of bike paths, which are, I would argue, primarily built for recreation. But if they were connected up to a number of the shops and that sort of thing, more people could use them for short trips, and then they'd get that benefit of incidental exercise. What I find on our rides and our events and that sort of thing seems to be regardless of age as well. And it's that people want the social connection, but they also don't want the pressure of having to, say, ride fast, have an average speed to keep up with. They just want to go out and see a bit more of their city and see it differently, and just be outside and have that vitamin D and just the good feeling of the wind in your hair and being outside and feeling the season change and that sort of thing. So I find that seems to work for most people. And also people that will be riding, say, to the farmers markets and some of the other markets here is just an alternative to, okay, I can leave the car at home because I'm trying to save money. And if it's one short trip, I know I can park, or at least, if not at the destination, then close enough, and carry what I need. But just a chance to leave the car at home to save a little bit of money that way, or just to have a break from driving because they might commute Monday to Friday, but on the weekends they want something different.
It sounds like what your bike tour and bike rides are doing is a bit post-COVID, where everyone is just really sick of being online. Everyone's really sick of it, and we want to meet people. Normally when you meet somewhere, it costs money. Maybe not everyone has money. Also, it's like you can't just pop up somewhere and the community exists. So that seems to have gone. But it strikes me that these are slightly longer rides, so maybe 2 hours or something.
It's a bit of both, and I offer a mixture of free stuff and paid stuff. I started out offering everything for free, and I would tell people, oh, these tours are an act of love, and I want people to come out and experience them and that sort of thing. But over time, I learned that unless the weather was perfect and it was still and the sun was out, I might have 13 people registered to an event, and then on the day only 2 people showed up. And a number of people kept saying to me, you need to charge for some of these to build in the value for the time that you're putting in, and then also to ensure that people turn up. So some of the rides are paid, and we have discounts for concessions, and start at around $25, depending also if I'm partnering with other organisations, Architects ACT. I did some other rides with various people, and there might be a price point there, but a lot of the things, the bike parties are free, the bike bus is free. It depends on the wind too with the bike parties. Sometimes I'll block out 2 hours around dusk, and we ride around Lake Burley Griffin in Canberra, the main lake running through the city. And we stop along the way sometimes for food or drink, or I show people some art in the National Gallery, and that's all free. And sometimes it's 2 hours and people just are having a lot of fun and they want to keep riding. But other nights I've noticed it's been windy the whole time, and we'll take a vote. Okay, who wants to do the long way home, or who wants just to go and get hot chips? And it all comes down to the weather. If we're cold and it's too much wind, it becomes a very short ride, and it can be an hour. I've learned the hard way that anything longer than 2.5 hours is probably too much. So I'm trying to keep it around the 1 hour to 2 hour mark. And that seems to work for most people. But I'm also conscious that most of the people that are coming to my rides, most of them, their kids have left home, or they might be uni students themselves, and so that the family commitments aren't there. So then I try to offer some family-friendly rides as well at different hours to make it a bit easier for people who have those sorts of commitments.
And so tell me about the bike bus.
So the bike bus, this is probably the third version of it that I've been involved in. So I was doing a few inspired by Sam Balto, Coach Balto on social media. He is a primary school teacher in, I guess they'd call it physical education teacher, in Portland, Oregon State in the United States. He saw a bike bus or bici bus from Barcelona. He saw videos of that and started with a group of people that would have a structured ride to school. And he thought, oh, that could work. And he tried it out and got some people interested and did videos of it, and it just exploded. He did his for Earth Day in 2022, I think, and filmed it and kept doing it each week, and children really got into it, and it's become a global thing. And so I saw some of his videos and thought, oh, maybe there's an appetite for that for Canberra. And the ones I was running for adults would be, I think, a Monday and a Wednesday from the north to the south across the lake. And I had a couple of people that would come along who wanted to know, okay, I don't need to do it weekly with you. I just want to know how to get to my church, for example. They had a safe ride with me and realized, okay, I can do this in my own time. So it didn't work out initially as I'd planned for adults, but it was with children that it's really worked. And so I've partnered with Kate Bradney from Walk, Cycle, Lynham and Beyond. She's a fellow activist who's been trying to campaign for slower streets and get more people riding and walking to school and just walking through the neighborhood. And we partnered with some other families, and we sat in a cafe and I explained what was happening in North America and said, look, here's how to do it. We have this particular route in mind. We will work with the families to see if that works. And Kate planned the route, and we did some test rides. And then in about December 2023, just before school broke up, we did our first ride, and we had about 13 kids for that, I think. And we've been doing it most Wednesdays since during school terms. And the numbers fluctuate. Sometimes we have 4 families. Sometimes we have 20 kids coming along. Our biggest one we had for, I think it was Ride to School Day in March this year. We had about 26 kids and 24 adults, and some politicians came along, and we had a big event and food truck and that sort of thing. But it's a consistent thing, and it's community led, and basically parents and carers or people who have some sort of relationship with a primary school decide that we're going to, much like a normal bus, have a particular route at a particular time, and we share the map with people, and we say, okay, meet us here, we'll all ride to school together in a group. And the way it works for us is I have a big a speaker on the back of my cargo bike, and I say to the kids, what songs do you want to hear? And so they set the music, and we just have a fun time getting to school, and the kids arrive happy and energized and ready to learn. And a number of the parents and carers tell me that, say, on a Monday, the kid may not want to go to school, but on Wednesday, on bike bus day, they can't wait. They're ready to go. So it's a nice, positive, community-led way of moving through space and kids getting to school with their friends or siblings, and it's one car trip avoided.
You've only been going for a little while. Do you have a sense that this is something that's going to be for the longer term, or you're just not even going there? It's a bit too soon to say.
We're confident that it will set kids up for life. One girl who came along for the very first one, she came on her scooter, and it was the last day of school, and everyone had a good time, and she got to school on her scooter. But over the summer break, she learned how to ride a bike because she told her family, I want to do it on my bike next year. And that's happened a few times where we've had siblings of children who the kid might be on a balance bike and their older sibling is pedaling. There's a little competition between the siblings trying to learn how to do it. And then the parents tell me that, oh, well, they've done the learn to ride classes and it's taken longer than they expected. But the kids made progress week to week because they wanted to be part of the bike bus. Because I blow my whistle as we're coming up the street. They can hear us coming, and it's their favourite songs from popular movies. And intergenerational too, with one child in particular is really enjoying the original 1977 Star Wars songs, or Empire Strikes Back and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of that. And then during the school holidays, the parents tell me, oh, look, the kids have been playing out on the street with their bikes or riding around to their friend's house. So because we've shown kids how you can do it, then they themselves figure it out what they want to do. But it all comes down to having that structure in place and then setting up the good behavior. And just, it's not just riding, because we're saying to them, okay, let's watch out for cars. Kids hit some loose dirt or some leaves and have slipped over. There might be some grazes, but we've got the first aid kit, that sort of thing. The child is generally a bit embarrassed that it's happened, but they'll finish the ride. But we've always had kids finish the ride. It's setting them up for life because they know it's a cheap, free way and fun way that they can get around.
So now children don't have broken arms, for instance. There's very few children who arrive in hospitals anymore with broken arms. Like, that just doesn't happen anymore because children are basically incarcerated and they're always surveilled. They have no sense of freedom or testing the limits. And sometimes it's wise to test limits. Some limits are not so good to test, but to have that medium ground. That sense of, here is the edge of my body, now I know what I can and can't do, gives a sense of confidence and resilience. Has that been your experience watching these kids? Maybe it's too soon to say.
So what I try to do is film most of the rides for social media to let other schools and communities know, hey, look, we had no idea what we were doing, but we saw something online and thought, let's try it as well. And you can do it. And it's spiraled that way. We've had other people see our videos and say, how do we do it? In part by filming, I've watched how the kids are interacting, because I'm generally at the head of the bike bus because I've got the bigger bike and the loudest speaker. I'm looking around me all the time, and some of the smaller kids, especially those with siblings, they were a little bit nervous at the start and just trying to maneuver their way through the footpaths and that sort of thing. But as they've gotten older and a bit more confident, they're trying to keep up with their older sibling. And there's even kids that are practicing riding with no hands and this sort of stuff, not telling their parents, but I watch it on the video and think, oh well, you've learned how to ride no hands now, and now you're clapping and singing as you're riding and all sorts of things. So yeah, they're building it as they go, and each time they do it, they're just incrementally, they're figuring out what they can do and what they can get away with and just trying it. And really the only thing that's stopping them has been getting sick. Sometimes they're too sick to come, and so they'll have to walk to school or get driven or that sort of thing. But they're figuring out what they're capable of and they're just doing it. And I'm trying to be some positive reinforcement as well, as I'm singling out some kids and saying, are you going to ride no hands this time? Or what song are you singing today? Or jokingly, you're too fast, make sure you wait for me at the preschool stop. It's really good to see kids figuring out what they can do. Because they're not my kids, I'm just trying to be the supportive bus driver, and the kids are just running with it. It's lovely.
And you mentioned there that you had some politicians join you. Do you get many? Were there different tiers of government there? What was their response?
Generally, it's been pretty positive. We've had a few politicians come along, or there's even one on another bike bus that I've helped with. An ACT minister has been involved, and they'll ride along sometimes when they can. But the ministers are generally busier than some of the other politicians that come along, greater responsibilities. But generally, there's been only positiveness, and some of the politicians that have come along have said, what can we do to support it? Or do you think it'll work somewhere else? And we know it will work somewhere else, anywhere really, because that's how the bike bus started. It started in Barcelona, and then it's become a global thing, and dozens of countries, literally hundreds of bike buses in various forms, some for adults, but a lot for children in different cities. The politicians have been supportive and trying to figure out what can they do to help. It might be asking questions in Parliament about access, government positions on speed limits, or can we improve some path connections? Can we replace footpaths? There are lots of broken footpaths in Canberra, plenty of suburbs too, that they'd be lucky to have a footpath, or if it was built in the early part of the 20th century and it's only on one side of the street. Common challenges that every local government area has of the lack of footpaths or the lack of connectivity, and with a little bit of tweaking, those connections can be improved, and we know it will encourage more people to move, not just on bikes, but certainly walking and wheeling as well.
Did you get politicians of different stripes, different colours, or was it just one side?
We've had all the parties represented and some of the independents as well, and that has flowed not just for some that can ride. I do storytelling sessions at night, and we've had politicians come along to that as well and observe and ask questions. I'm trying to make it as inviting as possible for everything that I do. I'm inviting diplomats because we offer different types of events, but the whole point is the cycle is a tool for improving our quality of life, and depending on what it is that people are interested in, then there's a way that you can use a cycle to help with that connection. I was lucky enough to do some training overseas a few years ago in the Netherlands to figure out how they built their society. They kept saying to us, look, the cyclist doesn't exist. It just happens to be a tool that we use for getting life done. And in the morning, I am a photographer, I'm walking my dog, but I need to go to the shops to buy milk. So in the afternoon, I'll ride my bike. And then at night time, I need to take a train, or at night time, I'll drive somewhere if it's a longer trip. A lot of the Dutch don't use cars for short trips, but they use them for longer trips into other countries. Trying to apply some of that knowledge to decision makers in Canberra and beyond to say, look, my group and others, we're not about every person on a bike for absolutely every trip. No. It's just how can we, for short trips, say 5 kilometres or under, down to the shops, medical appointments, catching up with friends at the cafe, how can we encourage people to consider choosing or having the option of a bike for that kind of trip? That's the main message we're trying to convey to politicians and others, is just think broader. This isn't about commuting. This is much bigger than that, and it's much more powerful than that. With some of our language, when we're promoting what we do, we're trying to remind people, yes, we get it. You need to drive for your job. But if we make it easier for people to have greater connections to their local shops, better footpath connections, that sort of thing, some of those car trips disappear because people are walking or wheeling. So that's part of what we're trying to do as well, and say to people, and we've had vision impaired people on our rides. I have a friend of mine who, she's moved back to Europe, but she has a disability, and she said, I can't walk anywhere, but I can ride my electric bike anywhere I want to go in Canberra. So just trying to remind people that there's all types of cycles as there are for all types of people. So how can we encourage or promote the use of different types of cycles, better footpath connections, and working with other groups to try to improve footpath connections? All these little things tie into a better quality of life. That's how we're trying to remind people there's so much potential in it. And it was only something that I figured that out going along. And part of my messaging now to people is these machines fight loneliness. We all want greater social connection. And I've joined Ending Loneliness Together, taken out some membership for that, to say, look, I have people that come along on my rides who tell me that they don't have any other social connection apart from going out to events like this, and I'm just trying to play a little small part in that.
Now I'm really curious how someone with a vision impairment can ride a bike when they can't walk.
Different couple of things. So in Canberra, we have a group called Fitability, which is part of Pedal Power, the local bicycle advocacy organisation. Some of these vision impaired people who use Fitability's bikes, they use a tandem bike. So they have a pilot and a stoker. The person who can see is on the front of the bike, and then the visually impaired person is behind. So they both need to pedal and to keep up, especially to get up hills and so on. There's that symbiosis happening. And then other times, a gentleman came along on one of my rides with his son. He's legally blind, so he has a very hazy vision. He can't really make out shapes. He was riding with his son, and we would describe some of the things that he was seeing, the war memorials around Anzac Parade in Canberra and down by the lake. Trevor just needed lots of space. So he was at the back with his son, and his son was calling out directions for him. Okay, you need to go left here, you need to go right, or let's stop here at the lights. So it depends on one's ability and what sort of cycle they would use in our experience.
I went to the Queensland Disability Network peer support meeting on Friday. It's fantastic. If you ever feel lonely or feeling disheartened by life, you go there, and it's the most inclusive, supportive, welcoming, appreciative group you can ever come across. And they just are extremely patient, extremely welcoming. There is something really delightful about the way that group is organised, which is just fantastic. And the woman who's blind, she has a dog, And then she also has these glasses. She's sitting next to me and I'm going, what's that voice? And her support person pointed to the glasses. There's an audio that the glasses have. So there's a slight distraction from bicycle riding, but I wondered whether that was part of what you're doing, is this audio. But clearly that's something else.
I do try to describe in as much detail, say, a memorial, but as far as audio tours and the headsets and that sort of thing, not there yet.
So you mentioned that you were thinking about moving to Europe at one point. Where were you going to move to?
Well, it was going to be the Netherlands because they've learned how to tame the streets for people. But these days, and having ridden through a bit more, I'm really enchanted by Belgium. I really like what the Belgians are doing with some of their cities, and I was lucky enough to go to Velocity, the World Cycling Summit in Ghent last year. It's a little university city of about 100,000 people, and they've done really interesting things like a traffic circulation plan where back in 2017, I think, basically you can no longer drive across the city. They've broken it up into segments and you have to leave your segment, drive around and go into another segment because the city decided we want to preserve the old town and just to deal with air pollution and noise pollution. We want to encourage people to walk or ride or take public transport for short trips. And we want to deprioritize private cars and say, okay, you can still use your car, but it's now a 30-kilometre-an-hour zone. And it's going to be a little bit harder for you. And in addition to doing that, they've also, like a lot of European cities, have enacted an ultra low emissions zone in the city centre to say, unless you've got an electric or a hybrid vehicle, I think basically you can't drive in here anymore because of the air quality problems. So trying to improve people's health, especially because their cities are very dense in the city centres. So a few measures like that. And exploring Ghent by bike and tram and so on last year, it was just really joyful way of getting around, and so I'm enchanted with that. Having said all of that, early on in my Canberra by bike thing, I met my partner on one of my tours. So not moving anywhere yet, but we're going to a holiday in Europe at the end of 2026, I hope. I just want to show my family what other cities are doing to improve their quality of life, and particularly providing that infrastructure that lets teenagers go out and explore a lot. They have 3-metre wide bike paths in a lot of places across the Netherlands and in Belgium. Apart from that, the big thing is slower streets in residential areas in a lot of European cities. Starting to happen in Australia, especially in Victoria and some cities in Melbourne, but there's a bit of timidity in Canberra to try that on, which we and others are regularly trying to prosecute and make happen because for various reasons we know it's going to work and it's going to improve everybody's quality of life, but our government hasn't got the courage to make that decision yet. But we're all pushing in that direction.
City of Sydney is just doing it. It's very beneficial, but you've got to get a lot of community buy-in. You can't do it from the top. This is absolutely one you have to get from the community. Otherwise, you just end up with a lot of backlash.
Yeah, and that's part of what we, with the bike bus and various things like that, is to try to build up some of the demand to show to people, hey, you're enjoying this structured ride with us now, but what would it take for you to be able to do a shorter trip by bike or walking with your friends? And it comes down to the infrastructure and the speed. And this is reflected in survey after survey, both in Canberra and elsewhere, what people want with their neighbourhood and what role can government play in that? And sometimes it can be even literally just helping share information about people that are already doing this thing and making it easier for them. And then finding opportunities for decision makers to come along and see what it's like and just try things, because what the Dutch wanted us to know is they had their experiences in the 70s where there was lots of violence of trying to make some of their streets safer, but they experimented. A city called Delft took some bike networking plans that didn't work in other cities and said, okay, well, that city didn't work. The first city where it was tried didn't work. The second one didn't work because instead of having a network, they just had one or two. And so Delft said, let's build the network and make it easier and find these missing links and fix them. And then as the network demonstrated, it allowed more people to move around. So what we're hoping, and one thing we regularly say to government and politicians, is experiment, try, hold the line, explain to people that this little improvement we're going to do to the neighbourhood or this trial is to see what it would be like, because we know ultimately this is going to result in a better quality of life for you. There's going to be some inconvenience, we get that, but hold the line with us because it will result in a quieter, cleaner neighbourhood and gives people more options in how they get around. But they need to try that first to get the data to then be able to show to other decision makers, okay, it's worked in this particular suburb, or it hasn't worked, but maybe let's pull this lever and see if that works. Oh, okay, or that didn't work, but how about we open that door and see if that works? Little things that they can try. And I see one of my roles and others that I partner with is to do that sort of things, to provide the political capital, I guess, for governments to be prepared to try things. and to applaud when they're doing it, because it takes a lot of courage even to say we're going to do this trial, because there's, as you know, the inevitable backlash. But one thing we have learned is that the noisiest people don't always represent what the majority wants.
So now we're at the point in the show where I ask, if someone has a chronic disability, what do you suggest they could do to help move this forward? Or if somebody has, like my friend who's a mum and she's got a couple of really young kids, no money, no time, no power, what's something you suggest that they can do to be part of this change?
I guess the first thing would be, are there community organisations or particular groups that are trying different things to help with some of those challenges? So, for example, in Canberra, we have a sustainability organisation called Sea Change. And in 2020, the ACT government said to them and a local bike business, we want an electric bike library, but we don't want to run it. We want you as the community to run it on our behalf. So here's some money, here's the basic structure. Can you go and do it for us? And that's been super successful. It's been running 5 years now, and they have a whole fleet of more than a dozen bikes, some bikes, cargo bikes for carrying loads, including children. There are electric tricycles, there are electric step-through bikes, different types of cycles there. So there might be the possibility there of trying it out or seeing if a bike shop, because I know in Southeast Queensland, there's, I think Everybody Bikes, there's a particular group that has electric bikes for people of all abilities.
So Paris is referring to a shop called Everybody E-Bikes, the home of inclusive cycling. And they have bicycles for people with short stature, dwarfism, people with disabilities, all sorts of different body shapes and sizes and needs. I don't normally promote a particular business, but because their business is the only e-bike business that I know of that focuses on people with disabilities, I'm fine with it.
Some of the come and try sessions are really, really helpful. But also just knowing that people in those circumstances you've described aren't alone. There are other people out there. And sometimes it just takes one person to send that message out or post something to a public notice board. Hey, I want some help getting around in this way, or I want to be able to get to my local shops or the local school or the sporting fields other than driving. Can anybody suggest how I get there? And trying it that way, because the hive mind I found is a really powerful way of helping address some of those challenges.
The other question is, if somebody's at the bottom of the food chain at council, say at the bottom of the transport team or the urban planning team, what do you suggest they can do to help make this change?
It can start with sharing something on social media or sharing in a community newsletter, or even just a personal connection of, oh, I know this particular group or these individuals are pushing for something at their school. Something else has come into council about this. Even just literally joining people together to say, you seem to be on the same page here. In Canberra, for example, a particular group is trying to push back against a particular development, but one of the reasons they're pushing back is they say, we're worried that this is going to create too many cars and we want a slower speed limit. And there are other groups, people that I know, that are pushing for a slower speed limit. They don't have a position on development, but they want the safer street elements. So sometimes just connecting people to say, you two seem to be, or you three seem to be after the same thing or working towards the same goal. Do you know each other? Because so often we don't. If there's people that have oversight of some of these similar topics, just connecting us, because so often we think it's just us and it's not the case.
That's great advice. We're just about to close. Is there anything that you wish I had asked that I hadn't? Any final closing remarks? Anything that you think, yeah, I just want to add that?
I guess the big thing is that if someone's thinking of starting something, then please be prepared to fail, because I failed at my first attempt. But because I'm stubborn, I kept going. And I started this to try to make some friends as well, because I didn't go to university here in Canberra. It took me a long time to realize that the people that I work with weren't necessarily my friends. They were just my contacts, and why should they hang out with me on the weekend? That sort of thing. So I built my friendship network out of this. Don't be afraid of trying something, and if it fails, that's okay. Maybe your bike isn't meant to go this direction. Maybe just turn it slightly to the right or to the left and go that direction and see what happens. Kind of be the bumper car at the Caboolture show, and just be prepared to, yeah, you're going to get some blocks, but just keep going, because it's fun. Ultimately, this is just about fun and joy, and that the setbacks are part of it. And I've learned so much from a lot of these setbacks. And I just keep turning things around and trying different things. I started out with the embassy tour, and now I'm doing storytelling, and I'm getting people from all sorts of backgrounds getting up on stage, even though some of these people have never done public speaking before. And I've said, here's a microphone, just tell the audience why using your bike makes you happy. and they get it. And that's all it is. These are happiness machines. And even if you don't know what it is that you want to change in your neighborhood, go for a ride and see if the ideas come. Because I get some of my craziest ideas when I'm riding my bike around, and I try to remember to write them down in case I forget. But you're just trying, because everyone wants a better quality of life. And there are people out there that are interested in your thing, or there's an overlap in the thing that you're trying to do. So I would just encourage people to just please try, because so much of what we need to do, address the various challenges, it just takes committed people to just try it, because this is just all from the grassroots. I didn't know any of this when I was starting out. I just knew how to communicate. And so I'm trying different things and learning from people all the time, learning from your podcasts, just trying different things. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but we just keep going.
Absolutely. And I actually have been thinking about the role of despair and these really big failure points in sense of, oh my God, I completely stuffed that one and I'm a disaster. And then I find often that's a time when I'm most creative, and I go back and I go, yeah, some parts of this are not going to work. There's some little gem, though, that remains that I can maybe rethink and go in that direction. What if I try this? What if I try that? And there is something about needing to keep on keeping on in that way.
Yeah, I had a bike party the other night in Canberra. Who was it to celebrate? Oh, it was ABBA. It was to mark 50 years since Mamma Mia was released in September 1975. And it started out with 9 people, but then it became a horror movie in that the people get picked off one by one. And so we started with 9 and we finished with 3, because somebody got a flat tire, others got called home, others were getting too cold and just wanted to leave. So it just kept going wrong. And then my speakers stopped working, and it was the worst bike party I've ever done, because things kept going wrong. But the people who finished it loved it. And then I got messages from people who didn't finish because they got the flat tire and that sort of thing. And they said, that was so much fun. When's your next one? So even though you're having the bad times, because we're all together and we're experiencing it too, a lot of people want to do that again.
Well, it's been fantastic having you on the show. Thank you very much for coming in during your holidays. Much appreciated. So you have a great rest of your holiday, and thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for the chance, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Streets and People podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who'd find it helpful. Your small action could make a big difference. We're on all the usual podcasting platforms, so don't miss a single story. To find out what else we do, check out getaroundcaboolture.au. Until next time, remember, there's more than one way to get where you're going. Keep moving, keep listening, and keep imagining streets made for people.